Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a little bit more of a technical video. We're going to be working on the Jeep and I don't know, we'll see where it takes us. I got a lot of awesome stuff that I've been wanting to put on this thing and it's finally time. So I hope you enjoy the video. If I can get you to subscribe, that'd be great. And either way, I'll see you at the end. All right, so a little backstory. This is my 98 Cherokee. I bought it about 2 years ago. I put a whole bunch of stuff into it. It came lifted and had some stuff, but I mean, I've done the roll cage, frame stiffeners, lockers, gears, you name it, it's got it. But today we're gonna be working on the suspension and getting this Jeep to ride a lot better. So this Jeep is awesome for rock crawling. It's running a Rubicon Express. I think it's a 4.5-inch lift kit, and it's running these Bilstein shocks. They're basically just Bilsteins, sit right there. The rear is the same thing, just the Rubicon Express leaf packs and the Bilstein shocks. So last year I was at King of the Hammers and we were going through some whoops. I kept bottoming out this shock, like this shock is way too long. I figured I need to do something to get this rear suspension and even the front suspension to be able to go a little bit faster through the whoops. The cool thing about a credit card, though, is that you can just keep buying and buying, and I mean, it's not even real money. It's fake money. You don't have to pay it back. All jokes aside, here's what I ended up for in the rear. These are King 2.5 by 14-inch smooth body shocks with the clickers, and they've been tuned by AccuTune Off-Road. I got an axle truss for the rear, some bump stops, and I have these. These are Shackle relocations, and these are by Taboo Customs. They're a DIY kit as well. Just weld them on. And all this tube is going to be for mounting the shocks in the back of the Jeep. My plan for those shocks is they're going to come through the floor right in front of where the roll cage goes. So it's going to be a big old hole there with the shocks coming through. And there's going to be a hoop assembly that goes down and bolts to the floor. I haven't figured it out 100%, but we'll make it happen in this video. So here's what I got for the front. I don't think I'm going to get the front install done on this video. That'll come probably next video. These are 2.5 by 12-inch King triple bypass shocks. And I bought those used. They were, I don't know how much, $1,300 for those, $1,500 for these. It's insane. But apparently they're new. I don't believe that. I guess they're just used for mock-up. But they have a whole bunch of, I don't know, they look like they've been used. So I wanted to get triple bypasses for the rear as well. However, they were a 12-month wait, a whole year just for some shocks. So these they had in stock, they tuned them for me, and they were able to get shipped out of the door like the next day. We're gonna pull this thing into the garage. I'm gonna take some measurements, and then we're gonna get started on the rear suspension. Super excited. So let's get to it. So I think the first thing I'm going to do here is jack the Jeep up, drop the tires off, and get ready to pull this axle so I can start doing some welding on it. So a couple things to check out here. Let's look at these shocks. These shocks, we're at full droop, and we got about 8 inches of shock showing. Let me go over to the passenger side. Now here on this side, we got about 6.5, right? And that's just the design with these mounts on each side of the axle, because we got one on the front and one on the rear on the driver's side. And that is supposed to prevent axle wrap, which basically makes your axle go forward and backwards under power. However, when we add these stiffer leaf springs, we don't have to really worry about that anymore, especially because this Jeep's only making about 200 horsepower. So the new shocks, those nice Kings, are going to be mounted on these. These are from Rough Stuff Specialties. They're super beefy U-bolt plates. And basically, the shock will be mounted on top of the axle now, and it'll be going up, bloop, right up through here in the body. Makes it so you can run a really big shock. Now it's stuck on there, of course. Here is the axle truss. This is where it's gonna sit on the axle. If you have like this whole 6,000-pound Jeep and you hit a jump, or you go and you hit something at speed, you run the risk of bending these axle tubes. They'll actually bend up. I've done that on the front Dana 30 a bunch of times, and this is just cheap insurance. I think this was like 85 bucks off Amazon for this truss. All right, the truss is all welded on. It fit up perfectly, and I think it's gonna work just fine. So next thing we got is these lower shock mounts. These are gonna be going. So I gotta cut all this off, try not to cut into the axle tube, and get rid of these mounts. The cool thing about that is that we're gonna be getting rid of these mounts to save us about 4 inches of ground clearance. That's a huge amount, especially because you see these have been beat up both sides. That's one. All right, the rough stuff. Leaf spring U-bolt perches are in and they look great. They fit really good. There's the other one over there. So yeah, I'm gonna go and install those shackle boxes now. I've got this all back together and you can see that shackle angle. That's what we wanted. That's that 45-degree angle. And that'll give us a better ride and better flex. So I'm gonna figure out where I need to mount the upper link for that shock. If I mount it in the wrong spot, the shock might bottom out too soon, or it might not flex all the way that it needs to. I'm gonna go and put the tires and wheels back on this thing and then go flex it out somewhere without shocks and just take some measurements and see what we got. All right, I want to thank the city for this beautiful flex ramp. I just took all the measurements I need. I'm gonna go back to the house before I get ran over. So the 2 measurements I took were the distance between the floor and the axle, and this was at ride height. And at ride height, it was 13 inches. The next measurement I took is I completely stuffed the suspension until it was on bump stop, and that measurement was 8 inches. So when the suspension is completely compressed, there's 8 inches between this and the floor. So the difference between those two, 5 inches, that is how much up travel we need for the shocks. However, you want a safety zone, basically saying that if you bottom out your suspension, you don't bottom out your shock, because if you bottom out your shock, it actually hurts them over time. So instead of 5 inches, we're gonna do 6 inches of up travel at ride height. So that's how much shock shaft should be showing at ride height. All right, so here's our pretty shock. And basically what I did is I just set this to 6 inches. And now I'm gonna take the overall length from the middle of each eye. Yeah, 29 1/4. So now that we know that the shock is 29 1/4 inches long at where we want it to be ride height, that's 6 inches of shaft showing, we can subtract our 13 inches from there. Boom. That's gonna give us 16 1/4 inches. And this is where we want it to be mounted on the roll cage. All right, so we'll measure here, right from the bottom of the floor, and we got our 16 1/4. My plan is to run a bar that just goes DOM steel and goes across here, and same thing on the other side, straight across, and then shock tabs coming out off of it. I'm gonna reinforce the whole mount and mount it to the frame. I'll show you that too. This is where the shock mount eye needs to be. So I just need to build some tube off of it and go from there. All right, I'm actually shit at notching pipe. However, I think I can fill those gaps, and this is exactly where I want it. All right, hopefully this doesn't bother your OCD too much. It is where it needs to be, so I'm gonna tack this second tube in and then fully weld both of them. And now we got this special design. The X is a little off center. It's special. All right, I think it's time to cut the holes in the floor. And like I said, we're both learning this at the same time. So I got a 3.5 inch hole saw. The shocks are 2.5 inches. So if my math is correct, it should have about a 1/2 inch all around it. Is that math correct? I don't know. All right, there's the shock. It's in its lower mount right now. And here's it into the cab. Ooh, focus. They look a little cantered inboard, which is good. That's what I was going for. Oh, that just looks cool. So I'm gonna keep this really simple. I got this cardboard aided design. Anyway, we're gonna mount these right there to the roll cage. There's gonna be a support across the top and then in the front as well. Now I just gotta transfer it over to some steel and cut them out. All right, here are the shock mounts all cleaned up and ready to get welded in. A couple days have gone past and I'm ready to reinforce the body underneath this. I want to make some kind of sandwich plate and attach it to the unibody frame that we have here. So basically this plate will get welded in place there and it's going to sandwich together from the plate up top. And then welded to that bottom plate will be this. This is just a 2x3 piece of steel. I'm going to cut it to size and then angle it so it looks pretty. That way, if there's any force coming down on the roll cage, it's going to be pushing down on that steel piece and against the frame. And the same thing when the shocks are getting pushed up, right? Because the suspension's compressing, it's going to be pulling on this. So I think that this is as strong as you can get on a Cherokee. There's no real frame, and this is all frame stiffened. So I'm going to clean it up and we'll do some welding. All right, this thing's all welded in place where it needs to be. And I also added these 5/8 bolts, and they kind of just tie everything together. Just cranked them down with the impact gun too. And the passenger side's done too. So I was pretty worried about like carbon monoxide and exhaust fumes and water, snow, mud, whatever coming into the cab. So what I did was I bought a tractor tire and I cut it up and put a 2-inch hole. They're 2.5-inch shocks, so this will get stretched a little bit, but it's got enough wiggle room in this rubber that the shock can move around as it needs to, but it will still seal off. So all that stuff isn't coming into the cab. What I'm gonna do now is put some RTV and some sealant all around the edges here, kind of make it look pretty so these screws blend in. And yeah, that'll kind of protect us from the environment and getting poisoned by exhaust. All right, guys, it is all set back here. The reservoirs are mounted and it looks awesome. I'm super happy with how this came out. I'm gonna clean this thing up, put some tires and wheels on it, and then we'll see how it flexes and see if everything works how it should. One more thing to do, and it's this rear seat. So this rear seat, see, it goes up and it hits these shock mounts. I've got a pretty simple solution for this. It's gonna make the seat be a little bit more straight up, but I don't care because I'm not sitting back there. Okay, so here's what I ended up doing. I just moved these plates up one screw on the bottom and then drilled a self-tapper on the top on both sides. See how it just sandwiches in there, nice and sturdy. The mounts are all hidden back, and then just whenever you want to pop the seat, boom. Ooh. All right, so the rear suspension is all done. Just flexing it out, checking everything. All the tolerances are looking good. I'm gonna add a 1-inch spacer here for the bump stop. No weird noises. And I just wanted to put this in the video to kind of get a close-up on everything. The brackets, the mounts through the floor, it's all complete and I'm really happy with it. I've been driving it around for like a week now and it works great. Here's the view from underneath. Cycle's good. I added 2 inches of bump stop here just because this is going to compress when we hit it. So added that and it's doing its job. Yeah, overall really happy with how this came out. Some gross fingers.
That's disgusting.
Well, I'm going to call it on this episode right here. We got a lot done, and I don't want to shove too much into this video and make it too long. Part 2 is going to be the front suspension on this thing. We're going to redo all of that front suspension, and that video is going to be coming out really quickly because this Jeep is going to be going down to King of the Hammers second week of February. But yeah, for me, I'm going to flip this thing around, bring it back in the garage, and get started on part 2 of this video. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give a thumbs up, like, comment. I hope you subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.